think. So
Um,
I have a million questions. How much time do you have, Dre?
I have a lot of time actually today. I'm actually pretty free, so this can be
I have a lot of questions, man.
let's do it. You know, I'm
And
ready.
and I did ask you before the interview if there's anything that's off limits, and you said nope.
Nah, everything is on and ready. Like I don't I don't really care like what goes out there. You know what I mean? I know I'm not in the wrong. I know my morals, I know my values. I know I'm not like a bad person. I'm not out here to like hurt people or talk down on others and whatnot, unless like obviously there's something off. But yeah, whatever questions you got, let me know.
Wait, so
Definitely.
I already picked something up. You said I already know that I'm not in the wrong.
Yeah, like I'm not a bad person. Like I don't think moralist and plus that could be a whole other topic, right? Like I mean like morality, like there's a lot of subjectivity to morality, I believe. I mean, I may be wrong to someone else, but right to many others. But in my own self morality, I know I'm not wrong in different ways of like looking at things. And I think the reason for that is because, you obviously know what I do. You know that I'm a mental health counselor. You know that on a daily basis, I have a caseload of like 45 to 50 clients a week. So, I do talk with a lot of people and I hear people's grievances. I hear people's resentments. I hear people's ways of looking at the world. So I think I have a pretty solid judgment in terms of like, what is wrong and what is right. And I also just feel like, yeah, after doing so much work with so many people for what is it going on? Like I started my career, I guess, like in my internship like 9 years ago, 8 years ago. So I've been doing this for almost 9 years already, I guess, talking with people.
Nice. Well, hopefully this will be a new discussion because I do love talking about psychology, and I want to go back to the moral subject. Are
Yeah.
morals subjective or objective?
In my opinion, I feel like morality is a very subjective basis to it. I mean, even if you look at like theories of like morality, like let's take like Kohlberg's theory of morality, for example. Like Kohlberg was this guy, I forgot what year, maybe like back in the 60s or 70s or whatever. But he created this concept of different stages of morality where there's like the pre-conventional morality, the conventional morality, and the post-conventional morality. And he basically says that like uh the first stage, pre-conventional, is usually found in younger kids. Like, obviously mom says don't jump off the bed because you'll get hurt and stuff like that. And that's wrong. You shouldn't do that because you got to take care of yourself. But then he goes into like the bigger scheme of things. And this is where his theory of morality is very criticized. It's like the post-conventional and conventional. Post-conventional, he says, is all about humanism. And the conventional is more about law and order. So people just have this sort of criticism that like law and order should be post-conventional and post-conventional should be conventional. But it's like it's really dependent on the individuals. Like for example, if somebody says stealing is wrong, right? I mean like stealing is not a good thing. You shouldn't steal, right? But a post-conventional moralistic individual would say, well, no, it's not wrong because what if that person has to feed his family?
Exactly.
And it's more humanistic in that approach. So then it's like, yeah, but then if you steal from the supermarket and you have a whole bunch of people stealing from the supermarket, how is that supermarket going to survive? You kind of need law and order in order to like survive as a society as a whole. You can't function without it. And that's why I believe, once again, morality is very subjective because you could even utilize Kohlberg's theory of morality in terms of how it how it manifests, you know?
Yeah, I do strongly agree that morality is subjective, and we're gonna get back to that. So I want to ask the questions in order. We're gonna get back to that. So
Yeah.
tell me about your job. So you said you're a mental health counselor.
Yeah.
So I know that you have therapists working under you, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
About how many therapists do you have working under you?
So I have two interns coming in soon, so that'll be three interns in total, and then I have uh four therapists working under me as with their pre-licenses and stuff.
Nice.
So that's about seven. And I'm
That
trying to add one more. I'm actually in a hiring process to add one more.
are you trying to add as many as possible or just one more?
Yeah, so as mental health counselors, we're actually limited to have five pre-licensed therapists under our belt.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I was Ubering the psychologist a few months ago, and he was saying that he had like 50 social workers under him. That's a thing too, right?
For psychologists, it's different. Psychologist is a PhD, so they have a doctorate, so they're able to see more, I guess, pre-licensed therapists and whatnot, and have them work under them.
So
But
how many?
I will be mindful, like that psychologist probably shouldn't be doing that because overseeing 50 therapists, that's I don't know how he's capable of doing that unless he's like not working and just simply doing the supervision, then okay. But if he's seeing clients and seeing 50 therapist licensed, I don't know. I don't think that's going to work well for the pre-licensed therapist.
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, he did seem a little bit capitalistic, but he did tell me that he was seeing clients. But Dre, do you take your work home with you?
Do I take my work home with me? In the beginning, when I first started, yeah, it was pretty hard. Then I had some great supervisors throughout my history as a mental health counselor, and they told me like they taught me things like to leave it at the door, don't take things personally. So it was something that I definitely had to overcome because within my personality, I'm a strong empath.
Hmm.
So like I feel people's energies really easily. So if I feel something is off, I know something is off. It's almost like a sixth sense to me. Like I could feel like a person's vibe and their energy and whatnot. And I guess there's like a component of sensitivity that comes with that, so yeah, if I have clients that um have some really struggling stories, sometimes it is hard to disconnect depending on the story.
Right.
But I really try my best to kind of just detach myself from that.
Yeah, and that must be tough. I call that selective empathy. That must be really tough. And I'm a real estate agent, but the thing is, I love psychology and I do think about being a therapist or psychologist, but that's actually one of my biggest fears, taking my home work with me. So what I would imagine is that you somewhat did some cognitive reframing and somewhat kind of trained your brain to be less, technically less empathetic.
Um, I wouldn't say less empathetic. I train my brain to learn the concepts of like something called compassion fatigue and
Interesting.
burnout. And these concepts kind of help me understand what I was feeling exactly, which helped me manage it more effectively. I wouldn't say that I've become less empathetic in this field. If anything, I feel like I've become way more empathetic, which I think is like could be a has its ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that are mostly benefiting from it are my clients. Like, because when I sit in sessions with clients, I'm definitely like paying attention. I'm definitely listening. I'm like sucked into their stories. And to me, it's like I'm not working. To me, it's more like it's great that I'm making money off of this, yeah, but like I'm more concerned about the client at the end of the day, if anything. Like even if my client's values don't align with mine, like that's how strong empathy I basically have is to the point of being able to detach myself from my own values in order to help this individual whose values are like maybe even a 180, complete opposite.
Yeah, which is really tough. One thing I noticed about people is people have a really, really difficult time understanding and empathizing with people who are very, very different from them. You could look at politics, for example, even like sometimes men and women, people have a really hard time, and people like pretty much only understand their own type and their own people, that's something that we all need to overcome. Would you agree that there is a limit to empathy? Or what I'm trying to say is that sometimes being too empathetic can make life harder. No?
Yeah, I mean that's why like I always tell my therapist and myself as well is like, in cognitive behavioral therapy, which, I'm a big user of in terms of interventions with clients. You talk about Piaget's theories of like cognitive development, and you kind of go into this realm of formal operational stage of cognition. And it's basically where he kind of, Piaget, once again, he was from the 1940s. So
Mhm.
he's like really old school, but it's funny how like his cognitive theories still stand till today, kind of, and the test of time, I guess.
Mhm.
But when you look at the Neo-Piagetians and their ideologies and the ways that they view things, they created this concept called post-formal thinking. And post-formal thinking is the idea of like being able to sit in a gray area and seeing things more nuanced, not as static. Like things are not as black and white, things are more gray, I guess, to some degree. However, they even claim that if you sit in that gray area for too long, you can definitely lose yourself in that process. So that's why I always say, it's important to have what they call like a relativistic commitment to your own values and ideas. And you have to know who you are because in this field, you can definitely get lost through other people's ideologies and their beliefs, and this is why I tell people, like not even just other therapists, but the clients as well, when you're navigating and search for a therapist, it's not really about the therapist's biases or their political orientation. Yeah, it may work better for whatever to connect, but
Mhm.
are you there to sit in your own comfort or are you there to grow? Because growth, you have to get out of your own comfort. So for me, if you're asking me if empathy is there a limit to it, or if empathy is something that, yeah, I believe if you become too empathetic, you sit way too much in that gray area and you lose yourself. And this is why I always go to the term, and I always tell all counselors out there, any counselor listening to this or whatever the case is at the end of the day, if you're going to be in this field, you have to learn how to respect other people's viewpoints, but you don't necessarily have to agree.
Of
Like
course.
you can disagree. Like you can, as a therapist, when you walk out, when the client leaves and they're over here crying about Trump's victory, you can definitely take a step back and just be like, wow, like I can see why, and I respect that person's viewpoints and their sadness and their grievance. However, I'm fucking happy Trump won. You know what I mean? Like you can you can just like you know what I mean? Like it's just like you kind of have to like you can disagree. You don't have to always agree. And then also, if you agree with all your clients, trust me, you're gonna go crazy.
Yeah, because if you agree with all your clients, then your mind is all over the place, and like you said, you're losing yourself. So I definitely agree that we have to stand our ground, and that black and white thinking that you mentioned. I just learned the term. It's called dichotomous thinking.
Yeah,
Um,
dichotomous thinking. It's a cognitive fallacy.
Thank you, ChatGPT, for putting me on to that. But yeah, yeah, as I am a strong believer in being in the gray area, not in the sense uh that you're changing your philosophies, but in the sense that you're not a dichotomous thinker, and in the sense that you're not so black and white, which is why when it comes to politics, I'm actually around the middle of the bell curve. And we're gonna get to politics later. I don't want to talk too much about it now. Um, I,
Yeah.
I want to talk about an Instagram poll I took the other day, which is that is it okay to walk away from mentally unhealthy people? And it was really interesting, Dre, because there were like 18 people that said yes, it is okay, and there was one person that said it's not okay to walk away from mentally unhealthy people, and that was you. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Wait, so what was the question again? It was, is it
I think it
okay?
was, I forget the exact wording. I think it was, is it okay to avoid mentally unhealthy people? And you were the only no, that it's not okay to avoid mentally unhealthy people. So talk about
Well,
that.
so the reason why I said no is because honestly, like I work with mentally unhealthy people. So like that's
Mhm,
number one.
mhm.
Number two, I feel like in my process of growth throughout my whole career, I feel like I've learned so much from those unhealthy mentally people. But obviously it's different for me because I have a therapeutic boundary.
Of
You
course.
know what I mean? So like it's not like would I walk away with a friend that's mentally unhealthy? Well, me being my empathic self, probably not, because I would probably want to help that person and kind of help them navigate through like their turmoils and their issues. But that's just me as a person. You know what I mean? Like I'm different in my personality, I'm different in my viewpoints. So like, and maybe the reason why I also said no is because I'm a therapist, so I'm used to working with mentally unhealthy people, so I can handle that type of relationship.
Right. So, because I did, obviously I took the fact that you're a therapist into consideration. Of course, I was referring to off duty. So let me just give like an example. So I'm sure that you have at least one toxic family member, at
Yeah.
least one, right? Now, my question to you is, how how do you handle that? Do you talk to them? Do you walk away? Do you avoid them? How do you handle that family member?
Well, once again, like, I have to assess my own personality as who I am as an individual. So when I assess my personality, I'm very open like if we're using the big five personality traits, you
Uh,
could remember it through the acronym OCEAN,
uh,
which is like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So within myself, after taking multiple personality tests, because as a therapist, we should all know who we are as a therapist and like know ourselves well enough to do this type of work. So within my own personality, I'm very open as an individual. I'm very high in openness and I'm very high in agreeableness. And for that reason, I don't really, I'm the type of person that doesn't really burn bridges with people. I'm the type of person that, like, if you do me wrong, I still kind of would want to like work with you because I think I can understand why you're doing what you're doing or saying what you're saying that I don't agree with. Even like, for example, my oldest brother, he, when I started posting about like Trump and stuff like that and all these more conservative viewpoints and whatnot, he unfollowed me, and I didn't unfollow him back. I can't do that. You know what I mean? So like I'm not that type of person to unfollow people. I'm not that type of person to burn bridges. I keep my gates open to anybody and everybody. I think there's a lot to learn from other people who have opposing viewpoints from you. And I would love to sit down and talk to those people, and I'm not the type of person, I'm not the type of person to say, oh, you're so far left, I don't want to engage with you. No, like I'm the type of person that's like, oh, you're so far left. Why? Why is that? Like, what are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your experiences like? And I can understand. Do I agree with your viewpoints? No, but I'm going to respect that, but then have respect for my viewpoints too, And I think that's how I personally feel like if society and America went in that direction and learned to be in that direction, I think we'd be a very united country. And I think we would work with each other and be able to understand one another more. But that's just my viewpoint. So I have a family member, going back to your question. Yes, I've had that happen, and I just leave the communication open. I don't say anything negative. I'm not like, oh, fuck you. Like, I don't agree with you. Like, I hate you. I don't say those things. And a matter of fact, my brother actually reached back out to me after Trump won, and he said, like, oh, I see. I want to know now why, you had these viewpoints. And he apologized for unfollowing me. So that was like a big thing, for me. It was very validating because like I said, like I'm a mental health counselor and I work with people on a daily basis. So I hear grievances, I hear what's going on. So I kind of like had this almost like uh, I guess, outlook that, yeah, it was going to happen. I knew he was going to win because, people are scared to talk and about things that are really going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I also knew he was going to win too. But yeah, back to what you were saying before. I think there was a lot of wishful thinking, and for the people who said he wasn't. But I want to save politics for later. But I want to
Yeah.
get back to what you said before, which is that oh, I just lost my train of thought. You said oh yeah, you said it's important to speak to people who have other
Yeah.
viewpoints as us, and
That's how you grow. That's how you
yeah,
grow.
to me it's even more important to talk to those people rather than your own party, because then it's just like it's just like a what is it called, a echo chamber where you're just hearing each other's thoughts, and you're not like you said, you're not growing in that way. And you to me so far you come across as a person who's very, very high in compassion. My question is, there must have been some people who have taken advantage of your compassion.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, So doesn't that inspire you to be less compassionate?
I'm good at reading that. Like once again, like, if you're like an empathic person, like I said, you have a sixth sense with people. So you can definitely read who's trying to take advantage of you and who's like maybe envious, who's jealous, who's like wanting the worst for you. You can kind of like see that. And I'm pretty sure there are people, like even people that I've literally have helped for years and then they come around across my Instagram page and then they unfollow me because of what I say, and it's just like, yo, like I was here helping you out and now it's like you see my content and whatever and you don't want to work with me anymore, even though I really helped you out like a lot. Like you look at the treatment goals and everything,
Mhm.
you've really changed and you're a better person now. And just because now you're seeing my content and you don't like it, what I say, now you want to leave me and whatnot. It's a little see, this is where the compassion sucks, right? Because it's heartbreaking. You know what I mean? Like it kind of hurts a little bit. It's like a it's like a, shot in like I got shot in the heart or some shit. Like I helped you, and then now it's like because of what my beliefs after I've heard
Uh,
your beliefs, which are
uh.
obviously the opposite, and I still helped you. You want to just like cancel and just move on, which I'm like, well, I think actually it was a good time to cancel too because you did make your treatment goals. So maybe we should have canceled maybe a long time ago, but you wanted to continue. But whatever the case is, so yeah, I think sometimes my compassion could be taken advantage of, but maybe this is why it's a good thing that I became in this field as a therapist because hey, at least I'm getting something out of it, financially.
Right. Well, so there is such thing as being too nice.
Hmm.
And would you categorize yourself as too nice?
Nah, nah. Sometimes. So a lot of people have referenced me as like kind of like because I guess if you use the zodiac signs, I am June 21st, so I'm like a Gemini and a Cancer. So it's interesting. Like I'm not really like a big believer in zodiac signs, but people have labeled me as like a Gemini because I have like this one sort of personality that's so compassionate and stuff like that. But then there's like the other personality where it's like you can come off as an asshole. Like, like you look like you're like an asshole, kind of like those shit that you're talking about, like all the stuff that you're saying, you could come off very like asshole-ish. But, to most people, I'm more of like the compassionate person. But to others, obviously the ones that I pull the strings off of or on, those are the people that might think I'm more like two-faced or whatnot. So it's kind of hard to navigate through this complexity of like, going back to I respect what you say and I respect your ideas, but I don't necessarily agree with you. You know what I mean? It's like, how could you do that? How could you disagree, but then show respect? It's like a Gemini thing, like I think only like people that have like that Gemini tendency can do something like that, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm a Sag myself, but I don't really pay attention to zodiac
Yeah,
signs.
me neither.
I don't really know too much about Geminis, but I have been thinking about this concept lately about how, there's some people who view me as so differently. Some people view me as this absolute saint who saved them, and some people view me as the fucking devil. And it's so interesting, like that black and whiteness, that it's really interesting to me. So the people who do think that you're an asshole. uh, how much of that is politics related and how much of that is not politics related?
I would say it's 90% politics related and 10% maybe like really being like coming off strong, because like if you go on like Rate My Professor and you look me up, there's like maybe like one or two very negative comments on that website about my teaching style. And one of them was actually this one person, I don't know, one student. So it was actually a little bit of a story, but I brought on this woman. Her name's Amaya Perez, and she's like the New York chapter leader of an organization called Gays Against Groomers. And I brought her into my class to speak on like drag queen gender ideology and all this topics that are a little bogus. And basically, she came and she talked, and then the end of the semester, after the semester was over, a student left a comment on Rate My Professor saying like, "Oh yeah, like he brought these people trying to really like gear us into like thinking that this is horrible and this is bad and whatnot." But if you look at my Rate My Professor, every student that rates me is like great professor, teaches, cares about the students, doesn't have any issues. He gives work, he cares about his students, he's very compassionate, very nice. And then you have that one student that's just like, no, he's a fucking asshole because he brought these people in to talk about drag queens and stuff like that. And then I actually reached out to Rate My Professor and I was like, look, this comment has nothing to do with me as a teacher. This is just like a topic that this person disagreed on and is rating me based on their disagreement. So I feel like it's unfair that this person, and also what they're saying about the guests that I brought were very negative comments, like almost like discriminatory. Like, like, oh, he brought in like this black lady and this other, and like started getting racial. And I was just like, can you take this down? Because this is like discriminatory. And then they said, like, yeah, we'll take it down. So they took down that comment. And then in that rating. So it was a very interesting thing. So I would say 90% political.
It's funny, Jay, because I was gonna save politics for last, but you seem very, very passionate about politics. So I think that maybe we should kind of get it out the way now, because I noticed that you keep bringing it up. You keep bringing up
Yeah.
politics. You keep
Mhm.
bringing it jump. So let's talk about it now. Just to because you seem very passionate about it. So you
Mhm.
seem like a very passionate Republican.
Mhm. Um, Passionate Republican, that's an interesting term.
Would you agree with
Well,
it?
I mean, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I used to be a Democrat. I was actually very moderate Democrat, like you, like like in the middle. I mean, you say you're in the middle, so I was
Yeah.
like more in the middle, but leaning left. And I didn't vote for Trump 2016. I didn't vote for Trump 2020. And I this was like the first year I did because it was like I saw the impact of that sort of woke mindset and how it's been affecting people. And I started questioning like where is this coming from? Like why are more people having these sort of ideas and viewpoints that are so aligned with this sort of belief? And I started to question it a lot more and worry about these sort of more progressive ideologies. So, for example, like even like the concept of pornography. Lately, I've been getting a lot of men coming in with addiction issues to pornography.
Mhm.
Lately, I've been getting a lot of moms and parents concerned about their 12-year-olds pornography
Wow.
viewing. So, when when I say something like I think pornography should be banned, which I do think it should be banned, people are like, "Oh, how can you think that? You're horrible." Well, I'm like, "Well, that's like your guilty pleasure. Like, you don't really need it. It's not a necessity." And the reasons why I want it to be banned is because of all the shit I'm hearing on this side of the pendulum, and like you don't hear it because you're not working with people. You probably are maybe like a barber or like a construction worker or like someone else that doesn't really work with people on a deeper level. So like for me to say that, I think it will be counterproductive if I didn't say it. Like I think like if you have like a parent coming in, a 12-year-old client that you have, and their parent is coming in talking about, I'm very concerned about what my child is watching, and I'm just like what? Well, I checked his phone, he's watching pornography. And me with my sort of, natural liberal tendencies, I'm like, oh yeah, but pornography ain't that bad. And then the parent being like, no, it's like what he's watching. And I'm like, what is he watching? They're like ancestral videos, mom and son, aunt, aunt and son, like your aunt and stuff like that, and like transgender individuals having sex with this and all this like craziest type of pornography. You know what I mean? I think that's the problem. Is like what they're putting on into these pornographic websites are very ancestral, like extremely ancestral. So like obviously when you have children going on there, 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds sneaking on there, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, are you 18 and over? Agree. That's all you got to do to get into these pornographic sites. So then, it's like I'm over here thinking like, yeah, that's pretty bad. Then my next client, oh, I'm addicted to pornography. I'm over here masturbating in my job's bathroom while I'm working and stuff. And I'm just like, holy shit, this is what pornography is doing to people. I'm like, damn, like I don't even need a research study to understand like these few people that are having these problems. I'm pretty sure there's more people out there that are just scared to come forward and even admit that they probably have a pornographic addiction. And like, pornography addiction is not a healthy thing. It affects the individual in so many ways that go unnoticed, like relationship issues, desensitization to like actual sex, not wanting to go out there and be motivated to find a woman and whatnot because you have that at home and it's taking away all your dopamine. So to me, it's like I see all these things and people don't understand me. So I feel like a lot of times I come off as very misunderstood when I say things, but I think the understanding should come from the fact of knowing that I work in a field where I work with people and hear people's grievances and problems. So, that's where I come from on that type of stuff. It's a lot. I'm sorry.
What causes addictions?
So I think what causes addictions are whatever is based in the environment. I think like the environment has a huge role in what causes addiction and generally speaking, but now you have to get specific. Now you have to ask me like what causes this type of addiction or what causes that type of addiction. And I think it depends on what we're talking about specifically.
What causes porn addiction?
I think, now, if we talk about human development, we know that at a young age, if a child is exposed to many things in almost its like prime years of life, right? Like the ages from like 0 to 6 years of life, those are the most formidable, sensitive years of development. So if a child is like molested at a very young age, like 6, 7, 8 years old, things like that, or has been exposed to sort of pornographic videos and whatnot at a very early age, yeah, I think you are more likely doomed for an addiction or some sort of hypersexual behaviors. And then I think also with let's say like even in the formidable years of identity during the adolescent years, especially when sexual identity is developing during that age, typically for a lot of people figuring out who they are, who they like, who they're attracted to. I think if you couple that with pornography, especially today's type of pornography, that can skew their identity and sexual identity and their fetishes into directions that may not be healthy or even labeled paraphilic.
Right. So what is the solutions to addictions? What's the solution?
Do what New York State has done when it comes to cigarette smoking, for example. Raise the price or higher the taxes on cigarette packs so people smoke cigarettes less. You sort of use more of a behavioral approach in society. Kind of creating positive or negative reinforcement in a way that will condition a person's behavior.
So I've done some research on addiction, and the two people who taught me the most about addictions are Russell Brand and Dr. K, the guy that I showed you. Now Russell Brand, he was a sexaholic, and I think he was addicted to chocolate. And Dr. K was addicted to video games back in the day. And I heard their perspectives, which I think a little Jordan Peterson too. And
Mhm.
they taught me a lot about addictions because I've never really been super addicted to anything. So it took me a long time to learn addictions. And basically, my understanding is that the number one cause to addiction essentially is emptiness, and it's essentially not having anything in your life to addictions are an escape. Addictions are an escape from the pain and suffering of life, and emptiness is really what causes people to get addicted to things. And the best solution is to have something in your life so meaningful that it makes you not even want to do the thing. It makes you not even want to drink. You don't want to watch porn because you have that thing in your life, whether it's a partner, whether it's a child, whether it's a great friend. You have that thing in your life that's meaningful that doesn't even make you want to pick up the cigarette or pick up the beer.
Mm. Yeah, I completely agree. And that's usually what I work with individuals that come to me with addiction issues is like, I always talk to them about finding meaning. I feel like I find myself as a therapist taking more of a existential interventional approach, like trying to identify meaning within life and what are some other meaningful outlets that you can direct that energy towards. So you're not directing it towards the addictive stuff. But like even you're saying, like it's interesting that you're saying emptiness because it goes back to, I guess, that question that you asked, like, what do I think causes addiction generally? And I said, like, the environment, the things in the environment. So maybe even a lack of things within a person's environment.
Yeah, a lack thereof, I think would be a great answer. Yeah, so I want to talk about confidence too, because a lot of people get addicted to things. Most of those people have low self-esteem, and self-esteem has always been a very serious issue, even before social media. Social media does play a role, but even before that, self-esteem and confidence has always been a pretty people have always been struggling with it. What is so I guess it's a two-part question. The first part is why? Why are people struggling with confidence? And the second part is what is the solution? What are the best ways to increase confidence?
Well, I think to answer that question, you kind of first have to define what self-esteem is in a particular way. And self-esteem is, my definition of it is like how much value you put in yourself as an individual, like how much value you see within yourself as a person. So the less value you hold for your own self, the less self-esteem, the less confidence you're going to have. But the more value you see within yourself based on your own subjective experiences or what you want to do and your motives, the more confident you're going to feel in yourself. So what was the other question? It was
What are this? How to increase your confidence? How do you increase it?
Well, you just find things like you said before, like that are more meaningful within your life, and you go for those things, and you don't really compare yourself to others in a negative way. Now, it's interesting because I always say this thing where when I was a beginner therapist, I would always like mention to my clients because that's always a problem, especially in today's society. Everybody's always comparing themselves to other people, and this makes them feel depressed. It makes them feel anxiety. If I had a penny for every time somebody mentioned their issues with their depression and they start talking about comparing themselves to others on social media, I'd probably be a millionaire by now. So I think that comparison, I always used to say comparison is a thief of joy. Uh, but then I started really thinking about it because I've also seen people get motivated by
Yes,
comparing themselves to
yes,
others
yes.
and
Yep.
finding more positive routes by comparing themselves to others and looking at others and learning from others. So, and then creating their own concept of who they are from that. So I don't say that anymore. I don't say comparison is the thief of joy. I say jealousy and envy are the thief of joy. Because when you compare yourself, then I question my clients, are you comparing yourself from a perspective of jealousy and envy because you don't have it? Or are you comparing yourself from a perspective of growth and learning? And are you switching that? And I teach clients how to like reframe that mindset of how they're comparing themselves to others. Like, always be mindful of the jealousy or like the envy.
If I had to fill in the blank, blank is the thief of joy. If I had to fill in that blank, I would probably fill it in with ego. Ego is the thief of joy. Dr. K, he says that comparing is ego, even if it's you feeling inferior. The way that Dr. K frames it is that comparing, that's ego. And it's so much, it's so hard to stop comparing yourself to others, and to do that cognitive reframing, and to look at it from a motivational perspective. So how do you tell? Because obviously you can't just tell someone stop comparing, right? Like if you do that, it doesn't really work. If you were to tell someone you should stop comparing to yourself, especially like a teenager, it doesn't really work. They still continue comparing. So how do you get them to stop comparing? How do you get them to do that?
Well, I simply, I use like psychoeducation to teach them,
Mhm.
about the issues of comparison, but also, I try to like frame it in other ways to make it sound more interesting. But I feel like one of the biggest things that you have to sort of attack or like dismantle in an individual is their attitude towards something. Like their attitude of comparing themselves to others. Like, what is it that you really feel about that comparison? Like what is your attitude towards it? Like, do you hate it? Do you like, like trying to identify the attitude and then sort of talking to them, maybe providing them like therapy homework. How did you take action this past week and stopping yourself from doing that? Because obviously, if you're not taking action, then this isn't working, and we need to do something else because now we have to talk and explore more of like why aren't you taking action, and then you go into a topic of something called cognitive dissonance, which
Mhm.
is basically the idea of like, it's like an example of it is so cognitive dissonance has a lot to do with attitude and action. So like, when you're talking about cognitive dissonance, you have to establish the fact of the importance of action to attitude. Usually I explain it to them. I psychoeducate people on it. And, believe it or not, I know you probably are versed in some of this concepts and whatnot, but a lot of people aren't, and like you kind of have to engage them in a way where it's like, okay, the idea of cognitive dissonance, a perfect example is like, if I keep smoking cigarettes and I know cigarettes is bad for me, and I keep smoking, that's a cognitive dissonance. Now there's like this strong tension between me smoking cigarettes and what I feel about smoking cigarettes. So you kind of have to like either uh reframe the attitude or you got to change your action. You have to like it's one or the other, like what's going on. So just getting deeper into it and exploring that with a client, I think could be very helpful. And I've seen a lot of progress within those things, but you kind of also have to talk about other things like discipline, accountability, responsibility, all these sort of concepts that very strongly align with conservative values.
I knew it was gonna come back to politics somehow. And I do see where you're coming from, because I've heard a lot of speakers. I've heard AOC, I've heard Vivek. So I do see where you're coming from. But just to not, I want to go back to what you
Yeah.
said before about cognitive dissonance. Uh Let's not. It might be more views if we talk about politics, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
of course. I know. I was.
I do love talking about psychology.
Mm,
So cognitive dissonance. My understanding is that cognitive dissonance is essentially when you have two contradictory beliefs, two
yeah.
beliefs that contradict each other.
Mm,
So, for example, I love cigarettes, but I should stop smoking cigarettes, or like something like that, or like maybe like well, I don't bel I'm anti-sexism, but I hate women. Something
I
like
got
that. And you could see it in a lot of people nowadays, and it goes in both directions. And if I had to give a solution to cognitive reframing, or just fixing the way that you think, basically, which is essentially what we need to do, what we all need to do to a certain extent, is to constantly catch what your brain is doing. So one of my favorite quotes from Dr. K is that
you.
awareness precedes control. And my understanding is that the more you catch what your brain is doing, the more you catch your brain lying to yourself, the more you catch your brain being self-deceptive and contradictory, the more you catch it, it chips away at the problem. And catching it constantly over and over and over again, whatever your brain is doing, will increase self-control, which you talked about before.
Yeah, and the control thing, and honestly, you have to assess every individual. Every individual is different in that regard. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? If we're talking about cognitive dissonance, and I like what the Dr. K is saying because it does make a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, when you chip at it a lot and you explore it a lot, I think this is why people in therapy tend to change their habits a little faster than people that don't have it because every week you're coming here and you're saying like, oh yeah, like I did this and I did that this past week when we're exploring it. So I think just in general, the therapy does help in that regard in challenging people's cognitive dissonance if they're open for it. You know what I mean? It really all depends on what they want to change or not change. But I do feel like, that's another thing, I guess, like, you mentioned like staying, like, I don't know, something about staying in comfort. I don't know if that's coming in my mind or something that you said, but a lot of times when I work with people, the big challenging part with working with individuals, especially if I'm challenging their cognitive dissonance, is like sitting in discomfort, being uncomfortable. I think people have to value discomfort more than comfortability. Because if you're constantly comfortable in smoking those cigarettes and it leads you to a state of comfort, and I'm not saying to challenge that discomfort just in the smoking cigarettes if that's something that you want to stop doing, but you have to generally challenge yourself through your comfort levels and things. Sometimes I feel like people are comfortable in so many various areas in their lives that it makes them it generalizes to like everything else. And that's what makes it more difficult for some people to take action on things because they're not used to the idea of sitting in discomfort. So you have to learn to be uncomfortable. You have to learn to sit in discomfort. So it's like, for example, like, when I was working on myself to be less agreeable, right? Like my goal in my own therapy was I want to stop being a yes person. I got to stop doing that because as a teacher, it doesn't help and it's not helping the students
Right,
either.
right, right.
So like I told myself, look, I gotta start saying no to people. And I swear to you, saying no to people, it makes me uncomfortable. Like I just in the moment I get this sort of like, oh my God, this person's gonna hate me, this person's gonna not like me. And then start speaking out more on what you truly believe on your podcast and in your videos. Uncomfortable. You don't believe the discomfort I had being going to the video and posting enter because like that's a discomfort I had to learn to navigate through to change my agreeableness. And it did go down a couple notches. Now I'm a little bit more assertive and a little less agreeable. I'm still a very agreeable person, but now I have better boundaries and I think I'm at a healthier point within my agreeable level because I don't, I'm more like, this is what I believe, this is what I stand for, this is what I am. Whatever the case is, it's fearful too. There's a fear component in it as well. So people have to challenge those things generally. You have to generally be uncomfortable in some ways in order to change. If not, your comfort is just going to guide you into and this constant loop cycle of hedonistic behaviors or smoking behaviors or drug use and whatever the case is. So that's what one thing I've tried to help people recognize.
You have to challenge your own belief system. And then like we were saying before, you have to speak to other people who challenge your belief system because nobody's belief system is perfect. I
Exactly.
do have a personal question. When did saying no When did saying no being hard start? When did you notice that that was hard? Did you notice in middle school, high school? When did you notice, wow, being no
Uh,
is hard?
I noticed it being hard when I literally went to therapy school and started building on self-aware practices when they were telling us your awareness of yourself is very important as a therapist. You got to learn who you are as a person. Taking the personality test. We had to do, I went to Hunter College for mental health counseling. They made us do a whole autobiography of ourselves. Mine was like 30 pages long, and it was just my story from like childhood all the way up until adulthood. And they do all these practices with us that make us become very self-aware of ourselves. So when I started noticing it was probably in my master's program at Hunter when I was probably like what, like 23, 24.
Yeah, because one thing I know about people is all our beliefs come from somewhere, whether it's childhood, whether it's adulthood, mostly childhood, but all of our beliefs and all of our feelings come from somewhere. So, your mind equated no with bad. Where did that come from? Where did that start? Like what caused that?
Well, obviously now I'm gonna get psychoanalytical and go into like my childhood, I guess, but also just the term that you're utilizing, it's called psychic determinism, and that was something coined by Freud, where it's like, your environments and the things that you're born into really play a role in your life and how you are. So like you
Uh,
don't have much control over that.
uh,
That's like a Freudian concept.
uh,
But my agreeableness I feel like came from my mom. Like I've she's a very still even till today, very agreeable person. You can even see it. So genetic factors probably is a factor in it. My mom was a very agreeable person, and that makes her a very nice person. So a lot of times she would do things like, cook for other people, take care of, do other things for other people, pay other people more than what she should have probably paid them, just being very loose and generous. So I probably like learned through her generosity that I should be generous as well because that's what my brain was consuming from her being my primary caregiver. And then also like my attachment style, was concreted from her. I guess I could say I have a very secure attachment style because she was a very loving parent, and because she was a generous, agreeable, nurturing mother, and she was a single mom too, by the way. It kind of showed me, I guess, that sort of love and affection, and now it kind of like came into me, which is probably why my secure attachment is even reflective in the work I do with people. Like I basically kind of understand others and I trust others, really well. And I think that's what they feel off of me when they work with me is like my secure attachment. And maybe that helps people that struggle with secure attachments and have more of like the anxious ambivalent or the avoidant or the dismissive, whatever the case is, sort of attachment styles.
Jay, are you comfortable talking about your childhood?
Yeah, there's no problem with it. I mean, it's just something that we all go through.
Well, that's why I asked you in the email because I did want to delve into that a little bit if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable going in my childhood. Like what era are we talking about?
So what about your relationship with your father with when you were a
Oh,
child?
I don't know my dad. I never met my father. I don't know who he is, to be honest with you. I had a stepdad when I was 6 years old come into my life, and that's why my mom left my dad when I was like barely a year old. I was actually born in Texas, so my mom was living with my dad in Texas. I had my older brother who's 9 years older, and I had my other older brother who's like a year and a half older. And then at that point, when I was born, like maybe 8, 9 months after that, my mom left my dad, and then we came to New York, and I just grew up in New York, and that was like my story, I guess. I never met my dad.
Do you have resentment towards him?
I talk about this with like my therapist and stuff like that. I've processed it, and honestly, no, because I don't really, I guess like it takes a level of understanding, I guess, like, based on what my mom tells me and based on what other family members tell me about him, it just makes sense that he would do something like he did and just leave 3 kids with a mom, so I understand that. Do I resent him? No, I don't really resent him. And then also, what else is there? Yeah, I always think about it. And my thing is that with him, I think he's actually taught me to be a better father to my kids. And I think that's like I thank him for that lesson, and that's me being optimistic. Like I thank him for that lesson, and I'm the type of person to my own self, and I practice what I preach with my clients is like every negative situation, there's a positive. You just got to find it, and like that's my positive way of looking at it. Is like, yeah, even though he wasn't there, it made me the person I am today. I mean, could I have been better? I mean, probably, yeah. Could I, I don't know, like, but it is what it is, and I think that goes into the idea of like I reflected not just within myself and not having my dad in my life, but also everyone else. Like I think adversity is important in our lives. I think we should all deal with some level of adversity. I think it helps us grow. It helps us become a better person in some ways. If you're born with a silver spoon, it's a you don't face adversity. What does that really teach you?
Yeah, it might make it hard to enter the real world if you were given everything as a kid. But you sound like a very forgiving and compassionate person, and I'm happy that you broke that cycle. You broke the cycle of the father not being present, and that is absolutely something to be proud of. And if I want you to walk away with something after this interview, it's to be proud of the fact that you broke the cycle, and you should absolutely be proud of that. um, there are some people and some psychologists who say that a little bit of resentment is actually healthy. I don't know how you feel about that, but there are some people, some psychologists or some people in general who would say, you should be angry at your father and you should feel a little bit of resentment. How do you feel about that philosophy?
I really don't agree with resentment because I see what it does to people. But I
Yeah.
also see that some people really struggle with forgiveness. And I think once again, I think it goes more based towards the personality. Like my personality, I don't really do well with resentment, so I try to steer away from it as much as possible. And I learn to forgive. I feel like it makes me a stronger person. But to someone else, it might make them a stronger person if they hold on to that anger. But I do believe in general, I think just for most people, I think having resentment is not a healthy thing. I think the reason why is because it generalizes in so many different directions in that person's life through their relationships, through their work, and through their, just daily living life. Because when you're a person that holds on to resentment, you become an angry person, and then that anger gets projected onto other people. So when you don't deal with that resentment, you are more likely to project negative energy to those around you and even internally to your own self. So I think that resentment, I would definitely like never encourage a therapist in training to say you should be angry at that person. I personally wouldn't encourage that. But once again, it really depends on the individual and what their goals are. But I think we have to, as therapists, steer very clear from promoting resentment as like a good thing. Maybe a little bit is okay, a little bit. I mean, we're human. I mean, I probably have a resentment that I can't think of right now on top of my head, but I'm probably resenting somebody at some point for something. And it's just I think it's a natural thing too. Like I don't think you could 100% get rid of all your resentments.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you said something that stood out, which is, I don't do well with resentment. That was
Yeah.
the statement that you said. So, what do you mean by you don't do well with resentment? What do you mean by that statement?
Well, I just feel like when you have resentment, you unconsciously hold things against other people. Like I always say, I'm not the type of person to burn bridges. I'm the type of person that just hires the tolls. Like setting stronger boundaries. Like instead of like I don't like think about it in that analogy, right? Like if you're the type of person that allows people to get at you and you burn your bridges, your whole city is going to be up in smoke.
Mm.
You'll be clouded. It'll cloud your perception. It'll cloud your judgments. Trying to build another bridge with all that cloud in your city and smoke in your city, it's gonna not come out healthy. So this is why instead of burning the bridges, I'll just hire the tolls and maybe even like decorate it and create in a way where it's like, resembling that person or that bridge.
Dre, I have a question
Yeah.
that might make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, fine, go for it.
I have the green light,
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
and you can answer. You don't even have to answer if you don't want to.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
it possible that you maybe suppressed some resentment towards your father?
Suppressed. I don't I don't think there's any suppressed resentment towards him, honestly. Like I can't like I I just see it because I don't feel uncomfortable talking about him. And it's not like I wake up every morning and I'm like, screw that guy, like fuck him. I'm not like I could see it within my actions and my behaviors more that I don't have suppressed resentment towards him. Like if I were to do certain things, like maybe even treat my son like shit. I don't know, maybe that would be like an action or like, just not have the motive to be a family man or just not um be able to like or if I went around like maybe cheating on my partner or something like that, then I would say like yeah, I have that sort of maybe suppressed resentment. But because I don't go around doing those type of things, I don't feel like there's any suppressed resentment. I would monitor it through my behaviors. And then obviously if I catch something in my behaviors, I'll probably bring it up in my own therapy and sort of explore it and whatnot and see what's going on. But I don't think there is suppressed resentment with my dad. I mean, um, like I think was also coupled by the factor that I had a very loving stepfather.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like maybe if my stepfather was an asshole too, I'd probably have a little bit more resentment, but
mhm.
he's a really cool guy. Yeah.
You sound like you've mastered the art of forgiving.
Yeah. People have told me that. Yeah.
You sound like, you're really good at forgiving, which is somewhat unlike me because sometimes I struggle with myself. So how did you get so good at forgiving?
Just being a chill guy. No, just kidding.
Well, yeah, that's essentially it.
Yeah, but I think it's how did I get so good at forgiving?
Yeah.
I don't I think there's like a natural it's like a natural thing I think for people. I think to get good at forgiving is it's just like I think it's a very personality based thing with temperament, like your temperament also. Like I have a very easygoing temperament, which is biological. So I don't really take things personally. As a matter of fact, when somebody's like angry at me or something,
Mhm.
one reaction I notice within myself when somebody's angry in the moment and it sucks and it has its negatives, but it also has its positives. Like I start to laugh a little at anger, which is weird. Like I remember when I was younger, like maybe when I was like 21, I was driving and I rear-ended this person and he comes out the car and I come out the car and I'm like, "Oh, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he was like angry. And I was like, "Oh, thank God." Like I smiled and I was like, "Oh, thank God." And he's like, "Why are you smiling?" And I was just like, "Oh, that's just like my reaction. I mean, you're okay. I'm happy you're okay." He's like, "This is not funny. Like what makes you think this is funny?" And I was just like, "Well, are you okay?" And I had to like, and he's like, "You're doing it again." And I'm like, I can't help it. Like, I can't stop my smile. So it's like, I don't know. I just have like a natural, once again, as told you before, like my mom being very like agreeable and generous. I guess that kind of played a role in like how I just deal with people generally.
I wonder how you would have felt if you force yourself not to smile. Because the way that I look at it is it was somewhat of a coping mechanism. It's maybe coping with discomfort, maybe, maybe hating the feeling of anger, you
Mhm.
know. So I'm trying to figure out like why do you think you smiled? Because I think it's deeper than just getting it from your mom.
Yeah, that's what my therapist says.
I think it's deeper. I think it has something to do with like, something with coping or something with just feeling uncomfortable at being angry, maybe.
Mhm. There is probably some deepness to it, but I just can't see it. But it's not like to say that I do it every single
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
When I'm like when something bad, when somebody else is angry, and maybe it's like more of like 'cause I guess even if you explore that example I gave, like I caused something onto someone else, so maybe I felt at fault, right? So I
Mhm.
guess it's like when I feel like I'm not involved with the anger, I guess I can then, smile. But I guess if I'm involved, like you're attacking me directly, I'll forget, I'll get angry. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna smile. I'm gonna be angry because like now you're attacking me and whatever the case is. So I think it's situational too.
So you obviously you do feel angry sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
But it takes a lot. It takes a lot to get me angry. Like a lot. Like I'm not an angry person.
what do you feel would you say that you feel sadness before anger? Is sadness like the default negative emotion? Do you feel sadness first before anger?
Mm, do I feel sadness before the anger? Nah, I think like when I get angry, I just process it depending on like the situation. Like I think like if you, I don't know, like if like the last time I blew up was on my wife. Like, I blew up on her because she threatened, like she called me like a pussy or something. And like I just like blew up. But it was a situation that happened. There were these kids smoking weed outside and she was telling them to leave, like go somewhere else. And I walked out with my son and I went up to them and I told them like, "Oh, don't mind her. Like, can you guys just please leave because I got my son and it smells like mad weed here." And the kids were just like, "Yeah, sure." And then they just left. And then when I came back, my wife, she was like, "Oh, you're such a pussy for being on their side and da da da. Like you're weak." And then I was like, "What?" And that's when I just blew up and I yelled like a fucking lion. Like, like you attacked my fucking ego, like what's wrong with you, so I think that was like only moment I probably ever really blew up like that, like got extremely angry, and yeah, that's like one, and it takes a lot, like I think that's like a lot, like, and it was
Yeah.
a buildup though, there was a lot of stress, like, with the kids and stuff, and then that happens, that was like the tip of the iceberg.
I think that your brain is really, really good at suppressing anger and suppressing emotions. Your brain, I think that you learned at a young age that that's a good thing and that your brain is really good at that. So I'm wondering like what you feel. Let's just say you're driving and someone cuts you off on the highway really, really bad. Does that make you angry?
uh do I get road rage? Nah, I don't get road rage like that. I wouldn't
So
say
what do
I'm
you feel when someone cuts you off on the highway? What do you feel?
I don't really care. I'm just like, yo, like that dude's probably late to work. You know what I mean? Like, or like I do it. So why am I gonna judge someone else in a negative way for doing it too? Like, like I don't. Yeah, I don't really get angry. Like I told you, like I'm not an angry individual. Like I don't have, and yeah, you're probably right. Maybe at a young age, I learned like the benefits of not being angry and like how it helped my mom maybe get far in her life. So I saw that and maybe learn like, yeah, the anger is not a good emotion. It's like kind of weird. Um, but yeah, that's just how I deal with it. But I don't have road rage. Nah, I don't really let people bother me.
So when you look back on that incident when you screamed at your wife, when you look back, do you look back with like shame or regret? How do you look back at that incident?
I look back at it like I don't look at it with regret at all because it actually taught me a lot. Like I feel like it taught me more about myself as an individual and just like made me more accustomed to my masculinity, I guess. Like, I think all men have an ego. Like we all do. Like you can't deny it. Like I think if anybody attacks your ego, you become a lion, you know what I mean? And if you don't, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you're more androgynous or feminine or whatever. But like when somebody like attacks your ego, like your manlyhood, like that like you gotta prove yourself like otherwise. Like no, I'm a man. Like don't call me a pussy. Like whatever the case is. And then depending on how you handle it is different, right? I mean, you can react. I think it's okay to react in anger and frustration in the moment, but the way you how you handle it is a whole different ballpark. It's not like I went and hit her or anything like that, or like did anything to the extreme of violence. I just yelled and I walked out. I'm like, yo, like, fuck you. Like, like I'm not a pussy, like, and just walked out.
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that you're absolutely allowed to feel angry. You're absolutely allowed to feel that anger. It doesn't make you a bad person. I'm just wondering because I have a little bit of a temper myself, and I have a little bit of road rage myself, and the good news is I have a lot of self-control. And as someone who has a little road rage and who has a little temper, I have a difficult time understanding people who are like so patient and so forgiving. And there is a little bit of envy on my part. I think that's a good thing. I'm just wondering like where those emotions go. Like what like do they convert into depression? where do they go?
I think it really all depends on your brain mechanism and like yourself as an individual. But I think like maybe it's just like your brain kind of clears it out, like your brain is kind of like a memory card, and like maybe it just deletes those emotions kind of in a way where it's like unnecessary stuff for your own health. I mean, if you look at me, right, like people tell me I look like I'm like 25 years old, but I'm fucking 35.
Yeah.
People tell me I look mad young. So I think having like a very low temperament, like a good going temperament, easy going, and knowing how to have self-control, I think it keeps you young because those cells, what do they call them? There's like a thing nowadays where they talk about these sort of cells that deal with aging. What is it called? There's something in the Phillies or something. I can't remember the exact word, but like these aging cells deteriorate upon like stress and negativity and things like that cause you to age. So I think when you have a low temperamental, easygoing temperament, you're less angry, you age better. And I think that's something that we should probably start exploring and researching a little bit more. Um, telomeres, that's what they're called. Telomeres are these aging cells that are found inside our bodies, where it's like, if you are constantly stressed, it deteriorates the cell and it becomes shorter. The telomere becomes shorter, and then your aging process speeds up. So like I guess but that has to be researched. I'm just talking out my ass, honestly. I don't know if like because I'm just very low temp, like very easygoing temperament, not an angry person, don't hold on to resentment, don't easy to forgive people, not anger. I think my telomeres are pretty much like not as deteriorated as. So maybe those emotions, maybe you just develop your brain is good at just like deleting negative emotions and kind of just chopping it away so it doesn't affect you in that way. So you're not suppressing or repressing, but you have to have, like you said, sort of some sort of self-control and emotional awareness. That goes into the term of emotional intelligence.
Yes, so you do seem very emotionally intelligent to me, and you, like I said, you seem like you're really really good at for forgiving people, and it sounds to me like maybe sometimes when people wrong you, maybe sometimes you put the blame on yourself.
Yeah, so that's another thing I wanted to talk about because we're on the concept of control and stuff, right? So like there in psychology, we know these terms called the locus of control. And some people have more of an internal locus of control, and some people have more of an external locus of control. And usually the people with internal locuses of control tend to take more responsibility for things that happen to them. People with the external tend to put responsibility on outside forces. So I always use the example of a student, right? Like student comes late to class. I ask the student, "Why are you late?" And the student says, "Oh, I came late because the bus came late." So to me, that's an indication, okay, you most likely have more of an external locus of control within your personality or your self-concept or your identity. And then another student comes in and I ask the same question. They come in late. I'm like, why did you come late? And the student says, oh, I came late because I woke up late. So to me, that's like an indication you probably have more of an internal locus of control because you are putting the responsibility on yourself. So basically, me as an individual, I'm more of that internal locus of control type of person. Like I do honestly, like even in my own attitude and my beliefs, I personally believe my belief is that, and people would probably argue with me. That's fine. This is not my own personal belief, but I do really believe that we are responsible as adults for everything that happens to us in our lives. Like even if it's something that's you feel is out of your control. I don't associate that with kids under the age of maybe 25 or adults even under the age of 25. But after the age of 25, I feel like you are purely responsible at this point for everything that happens to you, even if it's something that's out of your control. Why do I say that? Well, because like when you navigate through people's lives, and people are going to argue, there's a whole bunch of scenarios I've got through this argument. There's a whole bunch of like, oh, so then what are you saying? Like rape victims are it's their fault that they got raped and whatnot. Well, I'm not saying you shouldn't blame. I'm saying you shouldn't definitely not blame a rape victim. But what you should do is when you start taking responsibility for the actions and decisions you make, I think that gives you more power in coping with what is going on with you or what happened to you. For example, like whenever I'm listening to people and they're talking about like let's say a situation that happened that sounded like it was out of their control. Like let's say a client bought a house somewhere, and the client starts to say, "Oh yeah," and then my house blew down because there was a hurricane in this area where it doesn't really have any hurricanes, and it's like, okay, so you bought the house, right? Like you are the one that made the decision to buy the house, right? It's like, yeah, like okay, so then this happened. So who's responsible? And it's like, it's hard for people to grasp this concept, and I don't want to sound like an asshole with rape victims and stuff like that because I would never say to a rape victim, you're responsible for it, right? However, when they tell their story, it's like, oh yeah, I got dressed, I walked down this aisle, I walked
Here we
down this,
go. Here we
I did this,
go.
I did that. Here's the I statements. Okay,
Yeah.
so then, I'm not blaming you, but is there a sense of responsibility there? You know what I mean? Like there are these decisions that you made and then this thing happened. Your consciousness kind of brought you to this point. Now am I going to say that you're responsible? No. This is just my own personal viewpoint and how I see things because I have that internal locus of control. This is just my perception. This is my belief. These are my biases, right? Like, so I would say, I definitely don't ever blame anything for anything that happens to you, but there's also a difference between blame and responsibility. And responsibility is way more powerful than blame in many different contexts. But that's just my personal belief. I don't know what you think about that, but it's
Well,
crazy.
I think a lot. So the first thing is I think I figured out why you smiled while you got into the car accident because you put the blame on yourself. The
Mhm.
reason why you smiled is because you blamed yourself. You felt like it was your fault. And I'm just wondering what happens to a person when they're constantly blaming themselves for everything. What happens to that person? I mean, I would imagine that it leads to some depression and anxiety when someone is constantly putting the blame on
Oh
themselves.
yeah, yeah, and I think some people have a level of resilience to handle it, and some people don't. And that now goes into the concept of resilience. Like, how resilient are you as an individual? How fast are you capable of bouncing back from adversity? Basically, is like that's your resilience as an individual. And that can play a huge role in this topic to some degree. I don't think, the thing is like, I don't, I've learned not to use the word blame on myself. Like, I don't blame myself for things that happen. I take responsibility for things that happen. That's a whole different concept. That's a whole different ballpark because blame is more associated with a schema of other words such as resentment, regret, self-hatred. I blame myself, so I feel angry or things like that. Responsibility is has more of a schema of like hard work ethic, moving forward, taking control, doing you know what I mean? So it's like a whole different ballpark of wordplay, I guess, between blame and responsibility. So I think it's important to compartmentalize the two. I think like I don't blame myself for opening up my practice, right? I take responsibility for opening up my practice. Can I blame myself for it? Sure, I'm the one to blame. I created it all, but I prefer to go down the responsibility route. Like I'm responsible for opening up my practice. I'm responsible for doing that, and I don't think I'm denying the blame, but I just think I'm compartmentalizing the two concepts here.
I think what you're trying to say is that even though that X, whatever X is, even though it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility to heal.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes. And that's existentialism, by the way. That's existential therapy. That's an intervention about taking personal responsibility, talking about your own free will as an individual, and then, all these type of things. But you have two viewpoints on free will, right? Like you have the people who are called determinists, who are like, some of them are radical determinists, who basically believe determinism is like a philosophy standpoint of like, things are based on cause and effect. So anything that happens to you is not your fault. And you're kind of just in this, you didn't ask to be born. And then free will is, obviously the philosophy of like, I have control. I choose what I want to do. I'm an individual with free will.
So I'm gonna get a little personal myself. So my ex-girlfriend had probably the worst childhood I ever heard of. And one thing that she went through, one of many things, was that her grandfather raped her many times when she was a little girl.
Okay, so
Uh,
she's a little girl, so that has no responsibility for her. Like that's not a blame thing. That's not responsibility. That's like when your brain isn't fully developed, how can you handle personal responsibility to a certain extent? You know what I mean?
is it her responsibility to heal from that?
If she chooses to as an adult, yeah. I mean, I believe it will help her. If she chooses to get therapy and take the responsibility of doing the work and working towards healing, yeah, I think it's, I mean, who else's responsibility is it to heal?
Yeah, because there's no one else that's gonna save her. Like the guy already passed away, and at that point you just gotta save yourself. And when she does something toxic, and when she says something toxic, because we're still friends, and when that toxic part of her comes out, I do put most of the blame on her parents and grandparents. I do put most of the blame on them when she does something or says something toxic. I put maybe 10% of blame on her, but I'll put 90% of blame on her abusers. Do you agree with that?
Uh, well, I think it depends on the situations and like how she goes about managing those relationships. I think you said that you put 90% of the blame on the grandparents, you
On
said?
her abusers, on
On
her
her
abusers.
abusers and 10%. Well, I think her abusers, if she was a child when it happened, they're 100% to blame
Yeah.
because that's an abuse. That's like a child. The
But as
child is
far
not,
as far as her actions today, as her toxic actions today, how much blame should we put on her? How much blame should we put on her abusers? As far as her
I don't think
actions.
she should be blamed for what happened. I don't think children should be blamed for what happens to them as a child. Like that's like you can't blame a child for things that they weren't
So
even
let's
that
let's say she gives me a nasty attitude today. How much of that blame should I blame her for that nasty attitude, or should I blame the abusers?
I mean, okay, so you can definitely blame the abusers 100%, but the responsibility of her to work on that is on her.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't blame her for getting abused as a child. Like that would be insane.
Of course,
Uh,
of course.
yeah, because
But
like
but for
it's
the
like
attitude, for the attitude.
for the attitude, you blame the conditions, as a child. Like nobody was asked to be put in that situation. She didn't choose to make the decision. Like as a child, you don't even have the capacity to like exercise your free will to a
Yeah.
large
Yeah.
extent. You're limited, like
Yeah.
even just cognitively limited, educationally limited. Like you don't know. Some kids don't even know that they're being abused. They
Yeah.
don't know what that is. They have to learn it through their experience, which is the saddest part. So like I would never ever blame anyone under the age of 25 for like an abuse or even after 25 if it was like a rape thing, you know what I mean? But are you taking responsibility though to heal? Are you taking responsibility for how it happened? You know what I mean? Like that's going to help you heal, right? Like that's what I'm trying to say. It's not about blaming, it's just more about responsibility. Responsibility. Like who's responsible for this? Like I mean, it's just like it's like almost like an objective thing because when you talk with someone and they talk about some of their stories, I did this, I did that, I got up that morning at this time, I did this. You know what I mean? There is a little bit of like decisions that were made that led up to it, but that doesn't mean you should blame yourself for it. Like that doesn't. It's just like there is an essence of responsibility. Like I live that way, and I'm just saying from my own personal experience, me living that way has gotten me very far and it has gotten me through my own adversities. I mean, I didn't really open up about a lot of my childhood. We didn't even get to my teenage life when I was like, a little bit more, on the crazier side, I guess we want to call it. But yeah, that's a whole other story.
How are we in time, Dre?
I'm good. I got till 12.
Because the thing is, I now that you mention it, now I do want to talk about your teenage life. Are you comfortable with talking about that?
Yeah, I'm fine with talking about teenage life. I mean, in high school, many people know who I was and who I am and stuff like that. But like in high school, I used to like sell a lot of weed. So like I was a weed dealer. You know what I mean? Like I sold weed in high school when I was like junior, senior year of high school, I was selling weed and stopped all the way up until like college when I got into my last year, my undergraduate program. I went into the graduate program. I decided I had to stop this. So like I've sold weed for a very long time, and I've been shot at. I've literally been
Really?
shot at. I've been like I've been robbed. I've been, you know what I mean? Like I've gotten booked for having some on me, like possession more. And I went through a lot of adversity when I was a teenager because I guess like yeah, like I struggled with my siblings and stuff like that at the house. I was the first one to move out of my house when I was 18, you know? So like I've been through a lot of adversity and like, you know, did I blame anyone for getting shot at? You know what I mean? Like I put myself in that position. I chose to do that. I made the conscious decision. This is me at 18, 19 thinking this way, right? Like the brain doesn't fully develop until 25.
Yep.
So like, you know, I started taking more responsibility for the things that I put myself into, and you know, it has gotten me really far. You know what I mean? Like even the negative scenarios, even like the negatives, you know, being shot at, being, you know, going about like just living and people trying to like rob you and stuff. Like, you know, like I've had to do that, being scared of cops pulling you over and whatnot all the time. Like that stuff was pretty traumatic. You know, I have this trauma thing with it all because now when I'm driving as an adult with nothing on me now, I freaking a cop pulls behind me. I start getting mad panicky. I start to get nervous. I start feeling like anxious, you know. I'm like, holy shit, this is like from years of fucking doing that, you know. So I had my repercussions of it. I'm not gonna lie, and yeah, that's like my teenage year and young adulthood was like, believe it or not.
Sounded rough.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I lived on my own. I paid my own rent since I was 18, but I obviously, and I even paid for schooling with the money from the weed. You know, so it's like I just always knew keep school in mind and you'll be good. You know, that was like my thing. Like education is important. Always stay in school, which was obviously reiterated by my mom.
Were you an angry teenager?
No, I was not actually. If people that know me are probably gonna hear this, I was probably the most like softest teenager you probably ever met. I didn't really get into fights like that. I was cool with everybody. Nobody really picked on me. I was always just like really that cool, chill guy. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really have any adversaries or anybody that like was hateful towards me because I always just like got along with everybody. I was always that type of student that I was very popular in the sense of like I got along with like the nerdy kids to like, you know, and in high school there was like a segregated hallway called 42nd Street where you had like the black,
Cardozo?
yeah, Cardozo,
I was
yeah.
school safety there for 6 years.
Oh, for real?
6 years I was school safety there. That's
What
how I know
years?
42nd Street, 58th Street. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What years?
I was there from 2012 to
Also, I was after.
2018.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
graduated in 2008. But you know, it was 42nd Street. Yeah, it was like that hallway where you had the black kids, the
Yeah.
Spanish kids, the Asian kids, and the white kids, and the cool kids in the top part. So then it was always like, you know, I went through every group, like just dapping everybody up, being like, yo, what's up? You know, just being no one really picked on me. Didn't have any bullies or anything like that.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you've always been good at getting along with people. It sounds
Yeah.
to me like you're really, really good. It sounds to me like your brain is really good at staying positive and
Yeah.
forgiving and staying positive. But I'm gonna assume that somewhere along the way there were some depressive moments.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's traumas too. You know, like my brother got hit in the head with a bat because some dude like you know, shorted me some money, whatever, during an exchange. And then we went to his house, he got hit in the head with a bat, which, you know, was a pretty traumatic event. And that's actually like after that whole event went down, you know, I that's when I went to my own therapist at the age of 18. Or yeah, I was 18 years old at the time when it all happened. And I ended up like, you know, I ended up cutting somebody, you know, like literally like cutting someone and throughout that whole ruffle because they attacked my brother. So in a way, it was self-defense. Everything got dropped, by the way. Well, that whole case got dropped because it was just like a whole mess of like violent things that happened, you know, and it was very traumatic to me and probably very traumatic to my brother, you know, and like, you know, he got hit in the head with a bat, you know what I mean? Like that stuff is pretty, you know, it's bad, you know? So then after that, you know, I went to the therapist and I was talking with him and I'm not gonna lie, like that guy inspired me a little bit to do that type of work. And then I went took a college course in psychology. I was the first a business major, but then you know, I switched my major to psychology after all of that because that therapist helped me see things in a different light, even though my mom paid him like $250 per session
Wow.
a lot back
Wow.
then. Yeah. But you know, he was a teacher of psychology, exactly what I'm doing, you know, and like you know, I got a little bit like I would say like unconsciously inspired because after my like during my sessions there, I would always be that teenager that was like, I don't know, man. I feel like I don't need this. Like I'm a nice guy. Like I don't really hate people. I was in the wrong place, wrong time, dirty situation. I don't really think like I'm that type of angry person. I've never been in a fight before like that. I've never done any of that bad stuff before. I'm just a very nice individual. I just, you know, I just like sell my weed and keep it moving, like it's just that's just what it is, Unfortunately, this happened because of an asshole, so that's what it was. That's like one of my, I guess, traumas in a way. But I bounced back from it. Why? Because I didn't blame myself for everything that happened because I know everybody was at like fault at that point. But I did take responsibility for what happened, and I got the help I needed, thankfully, because of my mom. But like it's what it is. I took responsibility of it. I just held responsibility. Like, yeah, I was responsible. I was the one that did the exchange. I was the one that called my brother. I was the one that like drove to the house and knocked on the door. You know what I mean? So like, I'm responsible. Am I gonna blame other people for that? Like, oh, because the person had a bat, like that's his fault that he hit your brother? No, I'm responsible for it, and I'll own it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, that's how responsibility can work.
So it sounds like you has resentment towards that guy that hit your brother with the bat.
Um, yeah, but then it's interesting because I did see him like years after that, and honestly, I just said what up to him. I saw him, gave him a dap, and interestingly enough, 2 years after I saw him after that, he passed away.
Wow.
So like I that was it. He's like I don't know, he died of like an overdose or something, and or I don't know what he died of, but it was a story that I don't know, but yeah, like so. I mean, I was resenting him for a little while after the whole situation because yeah, he caused all this damage to me and my family and the kids that were involved, the other kids that were involved. Everybody suffered from that. Like some kid got cut up, like fucking cut his arm and stuff like that because he was like blocking me and I just had like the knife and I was running. Kid was swinging at me with sticks and bats. I was dodging, ducking, trying to run to my car at one point. I saw this dude that hit my brother in the head with the bat, just winding up, ready to hit me in the head. And I just like lunged the door at him and I just ran back away, like so it was like a crazy situation.
Is it possible that the reason why you're so good at forgiving people and the reason why you're not an angry person is because there's a part of you that's afraid of your own reaction when you get angry?
Um, Afraid of my own reaction when I get
As a
angry.
meaning like you might hurt somebody.
Uh, I, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know why this is coming in my head, but like I always used to compare myself to this Dragon Ball Z character called Gohan. And
Uh,
like because I was like the youngest one in the family and like my oldest brother would make me and my older brother fight, my other brother fight. And like I just remember there was like a point where like my brother would be winning and stuff, but then out of nowhere I would just get so angry and just like fucking turn Super Saiyan and like just go ham on my brother and just start beating him back up. And like I think maybe I don't know if there's any association with that, but I don't think it's because I'm scared I will act like that. I just think it's a reaction, like when I was younger and would just fight with my brother.
I think that explains a lot.
Yeah.
I think that there's a part of you that knows that if you get angry, you'll go fucking crazy. And
Yeah.
maybe that's why you're so good at forgiving people because you don't want to be that you don't want to be Gohan. You don't want to
Yeah.
be hurting everybody. So there's a part of your brain that's like, let's maybe delete or maybe suppress the anger so I don't end up like Gohan, so I don't hurt nobody else.
Could possibly be. I mean, I don't really think I would like get to that point though ever. Like I don't think I would get to a point of like extreme violence or something. Like I think at this point in my life, I mean, I don't think I will ever get to like an extreme point, to be honest with you. Like I'm just more like calm, relaxed, whatever the case is.
How do you de-stress?
I play like video games, I hang out with friends, I hang out with the family, spend time with my kids. Kind of a de-stressor, I don't know if you got kids, but
No.
yeah, it could be a little bit of a stressor, but it's like kind of like a de-stressor. It's like a de-stressor, stressor at the same time. Like it just feels good to know that I'm spending time with them, you know.
Dre, do you have some insecurities?
Insecurities. Yeah, of course.
Do you want to talk about them or not so much?
I mean, what am I insecure about? I don't know. Like, what am I insecure about? I mean, I think I have more like maybe like I don't know, like what am I insecure about? I guess like a physical insecurity of mine is probably like my nose. I have like a big nose. Uh What else is there? For my own self, I feel like I'm insecure about my voice, like how I sound.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's just I feel like my voice is kind of like it's not like it's not like a beautiful voice, you know what I mean? How some people have like a nice voice and stuff. Some people have like my voice is like very loud and just like obnoxious a little bit. What else is there? I'm insecure about mm, I mean, I used to be very insecure in relationships, like with partners and stuff. Uh and I always wondered why that was, you know. But
Have you figured it out?
I honestly I think it's like not having a dad there to teach me to be confident. Like, you know, like even though I had my stepfather, like he was not like a present dad. Like he was just more like, you know, there and financially helpful and whatnot and wouldn't be home as often. So like I think just not having like a father figure probably caused me to have less insecurity, more insecurity to my own self growing up.
Were you afraid that they were going to leave you?
What, the stepfather?
No, no, the partner, the girlfriend.
Oh,
Did you
no,
have a fear?
I was more insecure in like a jealous way. Like who's texting you? Like why are you texting that person? Like who's DMing you, you know? Like but now with my current partner, I don't feel insecure with her at all. Like I feel mad secure. Like I feel like I can trust her in any way, any possible way. To me, it was like a weird thing. Like I feel like you know, like I guess dating a very beautiful woman versus if we're talking like physical attraction, like a less beautiful woman. I just feel like beautiful women can elicit that sort of insecurity within myself at least. And I always wondered why that is. Like maybe it's just I don't have enough self-esteem, or maybe I like I said, physically I don't feel like I'm as appealing as that person. But I do feel that yeah, I feel very secure with my partner right now. And you know, I wouldn't label her like a freaking vixen, you know what I mean? Like a person with like a fat ass and big titties and a beautiful face and whatever the case is. You know, she's just more of a standard chill, normal girl. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a crazy. Everybody's looking at her. Because I dated a girl like that, where everybody was just looking at her constantly, like in the DMs. I dated this girl for like what was it, like 3 years? I dated her, and I was a fucking mess. And this was when I was like maybe 20, 21, 22, 23. You know, this is when I was younger too. So like I didn't really like that experience of constantly guys texting her and trying to get with her and her being all beautiful. And then every time I walk down the street where everyone's like looking and like kind of being like, why are you with that dude? Because I was skinny as hell. I was a skinny dude. You know, I weighed like 100. I was like 22. I weighed like 130 pounds. I was mad skinny and little, you know? So for me to be with that person was like, how did I get this? You know what I mean? Like, so I guess those are my insecurities, you know? But now as an adult, I feel like way more secure. I feel like now that I'm established, I have a career, I got a profession, I got like my physical, I go to the gym now. You know, I'm more secure, I guess, within myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that back to the beautiful girl that you dated when you were 20 in your 20s, I think that there's also like a feeling of inferiority, you know, like she's really beautiful, I'm not the best looking, she's getting so much attention, I'm not getting that much attention. So I think that there's a big feeling of inferiority and, you know, also a fear of them maybe looking at you and thinking like, oh, why am I with this guy? You know, like I have 100, 1,000 options. Why am I with this guy? So there might be a fear of, you know, fear of judgment and a fear of them leaving. So I think there's a few fears mixed in there.
Oh yeah, of course. Now all leads to these insecurities.
Yeah. Well, it's great though. You know, you found a great partner. How long have you been with this current partner?
6 years, I think, 7 years.
Great.
So,
And it sounds like you found someone who accepts you for who you are, which is really
yeah. And
important.
you know,
And
we both align in our values and our beliefs and our attitudes towards a lot of things. So I really like, you know, appreciate her.
so, you know, we all have our insecurities. I have my own physical insecurities too. So how do we deal with those? How do we deal with, let's just say, so there are insecurities we can control and there are insecurities that we can't control. Let's talk about the ones that we can't control, you know, nose, height, you know, whatever. You know, a lot of them are physical. How do we deal with these physical insecurities that we can't control?
Well, I mean, do what I did, I guess. Start hitting up the gym, you know, start working out, taking responsibility and accountability, and start doing things that are gonna help promote yourself as an individual to be a better person. Like I literally went through my phase when I was like 23 years old. I guess I ended that relationship and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, fuck, I look like a freaking stick. I gotta like change this. And I started going to the gym. I just said, screw this. I'm not gonna be inferior in this way. I started going to the gym. First 2 years, I went up to 160 pounds. I gained like 30 pounds in like a year, I think it was a year. I stayed consistent at that weight and that size. And then it was a habit. I cannot not go to the gym now. It's just built in me to go to the gym. I can't like stay at home and just not go to the gym. I have to go at least 2 or 3 times a week, at least. It's just a habit now. So I continue to go to the gym. I work out. That helps me take responsibility for myself as an individual and hold myself accountable. And that helps a lot just in life in general. And I think people really can understand that one and appreciate the value of going to the gym a lot. Or at least not a lot, just to keep maintain. Like now I just maintain. Now, believe it or not, I'm like 188 pounds, like of
Wow.
just muscle. Like I
Wow.
don't look fat. Like if you see me, I'm like a pretty thin guy,
Uh,
but I'm just all like muscle. So it's like that just keeps you strong, it keeps you focused and it really helps a lot. I think I know everybody's personality is different, everybody's locus of control is different, everybody's motivations are different and life experiences are different. However, there's a lot of benefit in staying physically active to help your self-esteem and help feel what you feel about yourself physically.
yeah, it gets physiological too. With there's a dopamine release when you hit the gym, and it sounds like it sounds like your self-esteem is higher than it used to be.
Yeah, yeah, now, yeah, because I definitely, challenged myself. I took responsibility. I sat in discomfort. I changed my lifestyle in many different ways. And now I'm like this, and I have gained self-control. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was always like when I was younger, I was a dog. You know what I mean? I was one of those guys that just like didn't give a fuck, and like just went around doing whatever I can. But then as I got older and I started working with people, and I always had this idea, like, all dogs are like men, because all the friends I surrounded myself with, we would all always go out, drink, party, and hook up with girls and call it a night. But now at this point in my life, when I started working with people, I started realizing that not all men are like that,
Yeah.
and it opened up the door for me to realize these differences in other men, and I learned from them. And that goes back all the way back to your question of would you avoid a mentally unstable individual? I know because I think I can learn a lot from them, and I have, like even a lot of these men that are mentally kind of a little bit unstable in their ways, they're actually really successful in other ways that they don't realize, which is like, if they do get into a relationship, they're most likely to stay faithful to that partner because they know their circumstances. They know that maybe they have low self-esteem and maybe this is the person that's it. This is the only person I should be with. But I that tuned my stuff down a lot more and I was just like, yeah, like this is actually beautiful. Like I would rather have a nice faithful relationship
Yeah.
than being a promiscuous dog going around having sex with so many different people and living a hedonistic lifestyle that becomes this sort of loop of just hedonistic behavior and you never get out of it until you wake up one day and you say, how am I going to take responsibility of myself today?
Here's what I believe. I believe that you needed to get that out of your system.
Yes,
Because the thing is, the way that I look at it is, if you never did that sleeping around, drinking, if you
yeah.
never did that, it would still be in your system. You would have a burning desire for it. So the way I look at it is, you needed to get that out of your system to get to where you are today.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie. Like, this is why going back to my idea of banning pornography, I did have a pornography addiction at some point when I was younger. You know what I mean? That was another thing that probably made me feel insecure and less attached to that partner of mine. And that's why I say, I do think, the pornography thing was introduced to me at a very young age. Like, I was like, what, like maybe like 11 years old when I first watched pornography and saw it in a magazine and saw like these DVDs and stuff like that. I used to hide it. Like things like that. And it's just like, that's why, once again, when you talk human sexuality, that a lot of it is pretty environmentally influenced. And growing up in the time period that I grew up in the, early 2000s, a lot of, rap music videos, hip hop was like the popular culture. And all of that had a lot of exploitation of women shaking their
Yeah.
asses
Yeah.
in the club. You would see those things. Sometimes that would be a thing to like, masturbate to sometimes. You know what I mean? And when you were younger, you didn't know better, and this is why I feel like in society, I think it's important for the youth, especially in today's pornographic world. We had that. Imagine today's pornography world with all these ancestral videos and all these videos of like nasty stuff going on with these kids nowadays. They're consuming that. What's that going to do to their sexuality? I'm a little worried for them, and like that's why I say I think at this point, like I know it sounds like a far-fetched idea, but if not banning it, heavily regulating it and really like only putting out stuff that's like okay or
Yeah.
appropriate. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, but that just leads to a whole other discussion. But that's where I stand on that, and that's the reasons why, because I know the effect pornography had on my life. Being that dog, I'm pretty sure we can even go back to the factor and say if I never watched all that pornography when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have this mindset of just sleeping with various women
Mhm.
and getting pussy all the time and thinking it's like the coolest thing and I'm the man and whatever the case is. So, I'm wondering if pornography had that effect and also the media influence of like, seeing that rapper that you look up to with all these women tossing money at them, I want to be like that. You know what I mean? It's like these are the things that we have to be mindful of.
Yeah, we are what we consume, and that's really important to talk about. Dre, I have a million other questions, but I want to save it for a part two. I want to save my questions for part two. This one, we got a lot out of this one. I have a lot more to ask, but I'm gonna save it for the part two, maybe in a few months. It was an
Yeah.
amazing conversation, man.
No problem, man. I definitely would look forward to it and just let me know where you're putting it up so I could put it out to my platform.
I'm gonna post it like right after this, so just give me like 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. All right. And also just a quick question or yeah, we could end it here, but can I talk to you afterwards real quick or something?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you can call me. I'll give you my number.
all right, cool, cool. All right, man. Take
All
care. It
right,
was
Dre.
nice talking to you, man.
Take care,
Be
boss.
safe.
Have a good one,
All
man.
right, bye.